All right, here we are for part 2 of equations of circles. So in order to go through this next part, I need you guys to remember how to complete the square. So hopefully you did 1 through 6 on the opener, whoops, and you were able to get these answers. And now I want to take a look at some of the relationships. First of all, in the perfect square trinomial, all of these second signs were plus signs. All right, that needs to be happened for it to be a perfect square trinomial. And then the next thing I want you to note is that you look at the first term and compare the first plus or minus sign and compare it to the plus or minus sign in the binomial. They should be the same. So the first plus or minus sign in perfect square trinomial matches the sign in the binomial on the right side. All right, now the next thing I want you to do is compare the middle term with a number in the binomial, and hopefully notice that it is half. So over here, if you take 10, you get 5. If you take half of 8, you get 4. If you take half of 12, you get 6. Okay. And then the last thing we need to notice is that if you compare the number in the binomial with the constant term of the perfect trinomial, you should see that it's the square of the number in the binomial, or the number in the perfect square trinomial. If you take the square root of that, you get the number in the binomial. So if you take 5 squared, you would get the 25. If you take 4 squared, you get the 16. If you take 6 squared, you get the 6. Right. So these are going to help us complete the square, which we're then going to use to write the equations of circles in our center radius form. Right. So over here in problem 7, I'm going to start by using what we found with the green relationship at the top. If I take that 8 and I divide it by 2, that should give me the number that's going to inside the binomial on the right side here. So if I take 8 and I divide by 2, that gives me a 4. And so this binomial on the side ends up getting squared is going to be x plus 4. And I know it's a plus because plus here. Right. And then we saw that the relationship between the number in the binomial and the constant term of the perfect square trinomial is the square. So if I take that 4 and I square it, that gives 16. That's what I would have put up here on the line. All right, we're going to do it again over here for number 8. Now, when I set up this binomial, I know it's going to be x minus something, and that gets squared. So if you want to put the negative, you can. It's not necessary because we've already taken care of it. If we take care of that 14 and we divide it by 2, that gives us a 7. So I'm going to go ahead and put a 7 in the binomial on the right side. And then to figure out what goes in the constant, I'm going to square that 7, and it gives 49. And so then the square of this perfect square trinomial is going to be 49. That'll be our constant term. Okay. So now we're going to go to the last page of the notes, and we're given the equation of a circle in general form, and we want to find the center and radius. So to do this problem, I'm going to start by rewriting it and give myself some room so that I can use that completing the square process. So I have an x squared plus 2x, and then I know I'm going to complete squared, so I'm going to put line. And then I've got a y squared and a 4y. And then I'm going to plus a line, and it's going to equal something. Now, any constant terms I want to put over on the right side. So if I was subtracting 11 here, I need to add 11 to both sides. And then I give myself room because I know when I complete the square, I'm going to need to add whatever I add on this left side, I'm going to also need to add on the right side in order to keep the equation in balance. So doing the completing the square process that we just talked about, I take 2 and I divide by 2, and that gives me 1. All right, so I'm going to set up my parentheses. All right, I know it's going to have a plus here, and it would be squared, and then this is the number that goes into my parentheses. And I'm going to square that, and that's what I'm going to on the line here. But if I add one to the left side, I need to add one right side as well. All right, and now we've got plus other stuff. I know it's going to be a y plus, and something is b squared. All right, now what goes in here and what goes on the line. So I take the 4 and I divide by 2, and that gives me 2, and that's put into the parentheses. Now I'm going to take the number divided, the middle term divided by 2, and I'm going to square it, and that equals 4. It's going to be the constant term for binomial. But now if I've added that on the left side of the equation, to keep it in balance, I need to add it on the right side. And so now I know that 11 plus 1 plus 4 is equal to 16. So now here's my equation in standard form. All right. And so now it wants me to tell you what the center and radius are. All right, so my center, remember we said it's going to be the opposite for the x, so that'll be a -1, and the opposite for a y, which is -2. And then the radius squared is 16. So then the radius is equal to 4. Okay. We're going to do n for this next one. All right. So in this one, my x's aren't right next to each other, but it's no problem. We can just move things around so that they are. So we've got an x squared plus 6x something. I've got plus a y squared. Now there is no y to the first in this problem, so we actually aren't going to need to complete the square for y. It's already done. But this -7 need to move over the other side. And I know I'm going to need to add something on the right side, and I've already added it. I've made space to add something on the left side. All right, so figuring out what we're adding, I know I'm going to have an x, and this is a, so I'm going to have a inside my binomial. I'm going to take that 6, I'm going to divide by 2, and that gives me a 3. All right, so 3 goes into the binomial. I'm going to square that, which gives me 9. And the 9 is what gets added as a constant term on the left side. And so I need to add 9 on the right side. All right, so now the y was already done, so y squared equals 16. So that's the standard form for my circle equation. And now my center, well, x plus 3, if it were x minus h, we would need a -3 for h to make that happen. And then we're not subtracting anything from the y, that's a 0. And then the radius is going to be, well, we know r squared equals 16. We square root both sides, and our radius is equal to 4. And that's it for equations for today.